Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And we have a lot to get into on tonight's episode. We break down the news of Kyle Bradish's injury and what that means for the Orioles. And then we're going to get into trade proposals. Some of the trades that have been speculated in the media, as well as by members of our Discord community, are going to be graded on the 20/80 scale later on in this episode. So you're not going to want to miss that. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Finals this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online. The game starts here. We also want to do, as we like to do at the top of every episode, welcome a new member of our Patreon community. And with that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yes, I'd like to thank a $3 per month low A or A-ball member, Boise_hero at yahoo.com. They will have to upgrade to $10 patron level to get the name they have listed here read on air. So thank you for your support. You know, you can pay for more exposure, but I think I will spray the air freshener instead.
And we'll now get into the news this week that Kyle Bradish is going on the 15-day IL with a right UCL sprain. Bradish started in Friday's game against Philadelphia and looked pretty effective, but was pulled after just 5 innings and was revealed after the game that he was pulled because of elbow discomfort. Now, for Bradish, this elbow issue is not new. The Orioles revealed in spring training that Bradish had elbow issues and ultimately underwent a palliative-rich plasma injection in his throwing elbow, which helped him get back on the mound. And he was able to make 8 starts with the Orioles before this trip to the IL. And up to this point, Bradish was pitching very well for the Orioles. So this is a big blow to the rotation. While we don't know the full extent of the injury just yet, what it does seem like is the Orioles will have yet another spot in their rotation to fill, as John Means and Tyler Wells are already down for the season with elbow injuries. So, Nick, I'll start with you here. What is your reaction in this news?
Obviously, like, we don't know how long he's going to be out for. Maybe he's back. Maybe it's ultimately surgery, and like all we can do is hope for the best right now. But it's really just my reaction is just this. It's a roller coaster that we've been on with Kyle Bradish this year, and I'm really ready to get off this ride, to be completely honest, because it's like the highest of highs with the Corbin Burns trade, and then you find out that Bradish has the original injury, and then he's back. And honestly, I didn't even like watch his first couple of rehab outings because I knew I'd be way too nervous and like waiting for his elbow to just explode with each pitch. But then it's like you get more comfortable. He's pitching well. He's dominating those rehab starts. And then you start to feel good. It's like you let your guard down, and like we got Kyle Bradish back. Like things are going very well right now. Even though you lose John Means, you lose Tyler Wells, things are going pretty well. And then watching that game, I remember, I don't know, I think Zach, you were probably at the game. I don't know if you watched the broadcast or not, Bob, but I do remember, I think I was looking down at my phone, and then I hear Kevin Brown say something about Bradish favoring the elbow or something. And I'm just like, all right, guys, they shake their arms all the time, sleeve, loosen up the sleeve, adjust a shirt, whatever, just keeping the arm loose. I don't know. But the way Jim Palmer was like, yeah, like just the way he said, yeah, after noticing the elbow thing too, Bradish favoring his elbow, like I could not enjoy the rest of that game. Just kind of like this pit in my stomach. And then we get the news that now it's back. This injury is back. And I think I'm not like in, super panic mode. Well, we're going to talk a lot about trades and other pitchers and stuff today. And I have additional thoughts with all of that. I just think that if it is serious and he requires surgery and he is out for the year and most, if not all of next year, then I do think, from what I've said the last couple of episodes when we talked about pitching, how I've kind of assumed that attacking the rotation at like the trade deadline maybe wasn't top priority. Maybe get that stabilizer, the back end of the rotation, allow the rotation to go back to 6 guys. if they make the playoff roster, great. If not, thank you for your services. You help keep everybody fresh. You help get this team into the playoffs. But I feel like now if Bradish is going to be out for a while, then like that's one of your top 3 arms. And I do feel like maybe the urgency meter to pull off a bigger trade might be a little bit higher, because I felt really good about this playoff rotation, and we're still looking way far ahead and assuming a lot of different things with that. But this where we expect to see this Orioles team in the playoffs, and if Bradish isn't going to be there, like I don't know how confident I feel in some of the other replacements in terms of like a playoff game and teaming up with Burns and Grayson in that playoff rotation to get us there into the playoffs. I still feel fine, but looking ahead, I'm a little bit more doom and gloom. You guys know I like went off the rails pretty much when he first got hurt. I'm trying to hold off and be a little bit more optimistic, but it's not great right now.
I actually wasn't watching the game. Which game was this? Friday.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what I was doing, but I wasn't watching the game. I think I was out somewhere, but my cousin was at the game and he texted me and said Bradish is in the dugout holding his elbow or messing with his elbow and someone's warming up. Like, doesn't look good. And I'm thinking, interesting. Okay, I'll withhold judgment. And then obviously when he went on the injured list with the UCL sprain or elbow sprain or whatever they categorized it as, I was just assuming, well, that's it. But then on Instagram, he posts a picture of him from his last start. And then there's comments from Nick Vespi and someone else with like fire emojis and prayer hands and fire emojis. And it's like, well, not a lot to go on, but that seems at least a little promising that maybe the MRI came back clean or clean-ish, or at least not like surgery level MRI. And I know a guy on the Mariners who at least some of us were hoping that the Orioles would trade for over the offseason. Brian Wu has had a couple MRIs and been like left starts early and canceled or scratched from a start this year, and then had MRIs and it came back okay. So maybe it's something similar there. Maybe they'll just give him a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks off and see what happens. But yeah, in other news, Tyler Wells got a brace procedure, so he didn't need Tommy John. Could be ready for opening day 2025. So even if the news is just that, Bradish does need surgery, but it looks like it's just going to be an internal brace, that's honestly not the worst case scenario, because then he could be ready for at least close to opening day next year. But hopefully, I'm hoping for the best, prepared for the worst. It's not great, but I do think there are options that can help. You're never going to completely fill Bradish's role unless they're going to go out and get like Garrett Crochet, which would cost a lot. But I think they can at least get a solid number 3 for the playoff run if they needed to.
The injury did feel like a bit of a gut punch because Bradish has pitched so well and he's been so efficient in his starts that it just gives you this feeling like, okay, we're out of the woods on this one, even though in the back of your mind that there's a chance, frankly, there's a chance for any pitcher to have that injury at any time. The risk with Bradish is going to be higher. So looking at the news that way, it was disappointing. Now, as for what it means in the short run, I'm just kind of waiting and seeing, because I didn't know how to feel back in spring training. And if you had said to me in early April, Kyle Bradish would be back in early May, I would have thought that was really optimistic. So we'll wait and see. But I do want to go to this point, though. Let's say best case scenario, Bradish does not have to have surgery or an internal brace now, and he's able to get back on the mound within the next month. How do you think the Orioles handle him the rest of the way?
That's what I'm hoping for. And even if it's longer than a month, I feel a lot better. And you bring him back 2 months from now, even to play it safe, or you bring him back in a month and you really slow play him along. I'm fine with that, because Cole Irvin seems to be the real deal right now. We've talked about this before, though. Cole Irvin's emergence and Albert Suarez's emergence have been massive for this organization. Cade Povich looked unbelievable in that last start. Looked solid in the first outing. You saw flashes, and then you're like, this is going to be good. I felt, despite what the final line of that first start showed, I felt pretty confident with Cade Povich after that first start, and that second outing was so much fun. Um, but like, I feel good about Povich. I feel good about Suarez and Irvin to help fill that void. Dean Kramer's coming back. He just pitched a rehab outing. Was that Sunday down in Norfolk? I didn't watch it, but he went 3 2/3. So it looks like he should be back soon. If they can bring Bradish back and slow play it and really save him for the end of the year, I do think like Chase McDermott is still waiting there in the wings. I don't think Brandon Young gets enough credit for the development he's had this year. If you end up like the depth is there, I think right now. And like we talked about, you can still make a trade, but you won't need to go out and mortgage a lot for a Garrett Crochet or another top line starter. You can go out and make another trade that I mentioned earlier, like a stabilizer type trade, maybe with a name that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But you can make one of those trades and to really just help ease that pain until the end of the year when you can kind of unleash Bradish a little bit more. Like obviously, it would looking at the different options that are in front of us. That looks like a pretty good option. And if that is the case, and he's back in a month or so, I still feel really, really good despite a limited Bradish, an up and down Bradish injury wise, and no Means and no Wells. I still feel good about this pitching staff if that's the case where he is back in a month or so.
Yeah, I would imagine he gets treated like Tyler Wells did at the beginning of the last couple seasons, where it's like 5 and dive. Unless pitch count is really good, then you can go 6 innings, and then in the playoffs, it's just like, go for broke. I mean, it's the playoffs. Hopefully, he holds up. He's either going to not hold. He's either going to hold up or not. So if you can, if you got to at least baby him a little bit to close out the regular season, that's fine. But once the playoffs hit, he should be raring to go. That would be nice in a dream scenario. But yeah, like Nick said, I mean, we have, even despite losing Wells, Means, and now Bradish out, Kramer's been out, between Irvin, Suarez, and Povich. I mean, those guys have been great, and we'll see how great they can be this beginning of this week against the Yankees in a pretty tough matchup that we're going to have there. So that'll be a nice test. But I think without any additions whatsoever, this team is a playoff team no matter what. Maybe even division winners with no additions. Could very easily be the case, but yeah, obviously we want Bradish back and healthy. So hopefully that's what happens.
Let's now consider some avenues that the Orioles could take to fill their rotation with trades. And we had members of our Patreon community suggest some pretty interesting deals, and we've had some speculation in the media about trades that could happen. We'll dive into those, and what we'll do is one of us will read off a trade proposal, say who it's from, and then grade it on the 2080 prospect scale, 20 being the lowest, 80 being the highest. I have a feeling that none of these trades are going to hit the high or low marks, but we'll see. And I'll start here with this one from Bobby Jones, a member of our Patreon community. He has the Orioles making a deal with the White Sox to get Eric Fetty and Michael Kopech, so the Orioles would shore up their rotation and their bullpen in exchange for Connor Norby, Dylan Beavers, and Kyle Bradish. Nick, how would you grade this trade?
I feel like the YouTube comments are going to be fun to read up from this section.
Hey, this is if anyone watching live wants to take their hand in a trade proposal, go ahead and comment it. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, it's fun, something different we're doing here. Honestly, I like this one. I'm not the biggest fan of Michael Kopech, but I would not hate this one. Like I put this at like I don't know if the White Sox are going to want Brnovich. I imagine they probably want someone a little bit held in higher regard, probably if they're looking for a pitcher in that return. But I do like this trade. Like a 2080 scale, you put it like my personal interest, like a 50, 55. Fetty's my guy here in this whole scenario. I will say that I think of all the options, and I know Fetty is going to be a highly sought after target, but I just read an article, an interview he did over the weekend, and it was about the impact going to the KBO had on his career. And he talked about like the stability the KBO offered him. He knew like he knew when he was going to pitch. He knew who he was going to pitch against. Unlike if he was back in the States playing in AAA, there's just chaos. There's so much shuffling in and out. You don't get that stability. And he completely revamped his arsenal. He was really able to study his arsenal and understand how it worked and understand how to attack hitters. And the KBO lineups, they're feisty hitters. They're more contact oriented hitters. So he had to study that and figure out different ways to attack those lineups. And it worked. He was successful over there. I just think Fedde's performance in Chicago is legit. He's not like luck boxing his way into this season. It's not like a future Cy Young winner. He's not a future ace or anything, but I think he's going to be really solid back into the rotation guy for a playoff team. And I think the season we're seeing out of Eric Fedde this year is for real. And he's got that another year of control. It's like if you are going to make a move and you don't want to mortgage a lot for the future here, and especially if Bradish is going to come back this year, honestly, I'm all aboard the Eric Fedde. And Bobby has Michael Kopech in with that deal. If the Orioles want a right-handed hitting outfielder instead of Kopech, let's go with Tommy Pham. I like Tommy Pham for the rest of the
all three.
Yeah, I'll take all three as well. Yeah, but yeah, I like that deal a lot just because I think Eric Fedde is one of my personal top targets that I would love to see the Orioles get.
I agree. I'm a big Fedde fan as well. I think I saw on Twitter, I think it was Dan Sanchez commented or tweeted some data about Fedde and how his new pitch mix is very similar to Kyle Bradish, and that it's almost like, you could replace Kyle Bradish with the poor man's Kyle Bradish and Eric Fedde. And like you said, he's under team control next year. I think it's like a team option for $8 million or something that's very, manageable from a financial standpoint. I would love to get him. Kopech, I feel like, is just a higher upside Michael Baumann at this point. Like, you're going to be frustrated because there's going to be times where he looks dominant and times where he gives up 2 home runs in an inning. So, I mean, I could see them wanting to work with an arm like that. And, yeah, throw Tommy Pham in as well. If it's Fedde, Kopech, and Pham for Norby, Beavers, and Branovich, I would hate to lose Norby and Beavers in the same trade, but I'd say 55. Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable deal.
I landed right about the same spot you guys did. I give this a 50. I think I would give it a higher grade if you took Kopech out of the deal. Maybe you swap Kopech and Tanner Banks, who I like a little bit better than Kopech. My issues with Kopech are the walks and the fact that he is a real fly ball pitcher. So there's a certain volatility attached to him that I just don't necessarily know that he makes the bullpen better over the remainder of the year. Now, maybe next year you look ahead and see if the Orioles can fix him a little bit in his contract year and get more out of him. But I don't know. I don't have the assurance that he's going to come in and really make things better. Banks, on the other hand, doesn't walk as many guys. He's not having a great season statistically either. But you look at the FIP is better. The expected ERA and the FIP are better than his ERA. Good strikeout numbers. So I would consider him rather than Kopech. And to your guys' point, Eric Fedde makes so much sense for the Orioles that I just don't see how they don't trade for him, unless it's a situation where so many teams are in on him that the price just becomes astronomical because you have him under control for the rest of this year and then $7.5 million for 2025. That's very reasonable for a guy that's good enough to be a number 3 starter on a contending team. So he can come in, he can make your rotation better down the stretch. He stabilizes the middle of it and gives you some upside, and you're going to be able to pencil him in for playoff starts.
Yeah. And that extra year, like next year, who knows what this rotation is going to look like, right? Especially if Bradish is out for an extended period of time and Burns, like where's Burns going to go? Like there are a lot of question marks in next year's rotation. So I like the safety blanket too of the extra year's control there with Fedde. This one's from Ben. He has a trade with the Pirates, Quinn Priester and David Bednar. I don't know why I kept wanting to say Eric. David Bednar for Hudson Haskin, Connor Norby, Enrique Bradfield, and Alex Pham. What do you guys think about that deal?
I liked it until he said Enrique Bradfield. I am not giving up. I'm not selling low on Enrique Bradfield 2 months into his professional career, full season career. Maybe if you trade out Bradfield for like Billy Cook or something, I think I would be much more about it. Priester, kind of a starting pitcher prospect, top 100 at times, but his fastball, while having a little bit of velocity, pretty straight and hittable, probably could work better as a relief arm. And David Bednar, obviously, very good reliever. So wouldn't mind that deal. But this iteration, I would give a 35.
I'll go a little higher. I'll go 40. Bednar's strikeout numbers are down this year. The ERA is not good, but I feel like over the course of a half season, he's going to do fine. Some issues that I have with this deal, I agree with Bob that I would not include Bradfield in it just because I think he would be selling low. And then Priester, I don't think it makes sense for the Pirates to trade Priester now. And while there is some long-term upside there, does Priester really make the Orioles rotation better down the stretch? And is this a guy who at 23, he's going to be 23 later this season. Actually, he is 23 now. He'll be 24 in September. That at 24 years old with very little major league experience is going to come in, pitch well down the stretch, and then be in your playoff rotation. So this deal could be better, but there's some parts to it that I like. And I wouldn't be upset at all if the Orioles pursued Bednar at the deadline.
I could not care less about Quentin Priester. Bednar, I would love to have, but I also wonder, like, what are the Pirates going to do? Because they're in contention. The NL, like, is not very good this year. I think they're only like a game out of the wild card right now. Like, they could win the NL Central if they made a move and went for it. They do have a lot of young talent that I always love the Pirates drafts, but I just don't know if I'm not familiar enough with their organization to say like with any definitive reasoning here. But I feel like if they had better player development in certain areas, like they would have nailed these previous draft classes. But there are still some tremendous talents in this organization, and guys like Henry Davis, if he can come back up and start hitting, like I feel like the Pirates could make a move or two and be right in the thick of this a playoff race. I don't want to trade Enrique Bradfield for relief arms right now. Not if you just drafted him this year. So yeah, I'd go like the 30, 35 route as well.
All right, next proposal is also from Ben Dorst at Orioles Status 1. If you want to get at him about these trade proposals, you can critique him over there. He has also a proposal for Kyle Stowers and Alex Pham to the Washington Nationals for a reunite with Hunter Harvey, relief pitcher. What do we think about that?
I would give this one a 45, and my hesitation with it is including Stowers now for a couple of reasons. One, I think you could actually be selling low on him, and two, I think there's room for Kyle Stowers on this team down the stretch to make an impact. Maybe he's not an everyday player, but if he could be the guy that starts twice a week for you and gives you some power from the left side and adequately covers ground at the corner spots, that gives you some value. So I would be hesitant to part with Stowers because I think he could actually be a piece for this team down the stretch.
You know, I kind of like this deal. I'm not going to lie. I'll give it like 60, 65. I think I really do enjoy. Hunter Harvey's having a really solid year. He's had a couple of solid years there in Washington. I imagine his numbers look even better when he doesn't have to face Ryan Mountcastle. I feel like he would be a good clubhouse fit since him and Mountcastle are good buddies. He clearly how long was he on this top prospect list in Baltimore? Like 18 years, it felt like, just every single year. He was never graduate from these prospect lists. I'm down. Like Pham, I like Pham. He's had an up and down year. He's been pitching much better over the last month or so. Still racking up good strikeouts, not walking a ton of guys, but he's a double-A arm who's had like one really good year so far. Stowers, I'm thrilled that Stowers is serving in the role that he is right now and finding success in the big leagues. But I feel like he's like Heston Kjerstad's still in this roster. Like I feel like Stowers is replaceable enough where Hunter Harvey, could add a little bit more stability in this bullpen and be an eighth inning guy. If it's not Craig Kimbrell's night, you got Hunter Harvey there to fall back on. I like this deal.
I love it. I love this trade. And I hate to say I love anything that Ben Dorst has proposed. No, I'm just kidding. This is a really good one. Just because, like Nick said, Stowers, great. I still am a fan. I think he could excel in Washington with some full-time playing time. And Alex Pham, another arm we like, but this is the year of the pitcher, and those arms are expanding to multiple times what it have been the past few years. And Hunter Harvey is under control the rest of this year and next. Since he's gone to Washington, 2022 to now, he's had an ERA of 2.52, 2.82, 2.75. His FIP is like right in line with that too, so it's not like it's been good luck. 60 innings last year. He's already at 36 this year. I think that's a really good trade. I'll give it a 60 as well.
Yeah. And an underrated thing I just thought about, a trade with the Nationals, if the Orioles make that move, Brad Selick is over there in Washington now. Love you, Brad. Hope you're doing well. But he knows this system inside and out. He can identify some of those guys that he drafted that he'd probably really like and enjoy, like some of the non-top prospect guys. And I wonder if he could have enough influence to be like, look, I really like this guy. I really like this guy. I really like that guy. They're not on, the top 30 list, but like they've got the goods. We can make them future major leaguers. And I wonder if, that helps out a little bit or hurts. I don't know, but
I also don't.
Oh,
sorry, Zach. I was just going to say, I don't know if the Nationals are going to want to sell really either, because again, the National League is like everyone's in the hunt except for the Marlins and the Rockies, I guess. But we also have Billy Cook. We have Fabian and Beavers, who will be in AAA soon. We have Hudson Haskin. Like Stowers, certainly expendable, just from a loaded farm system standpoint.
Yeah, I was just about to throw in there that I think it'd be very unlike Mike Rizzo to sell when you're this close to a wild card spot, especially after some down years, where I think that they've done a good job in some areas of rebuilding the organization. So we'll see, but I think that's definitely a trade worth considering. I'll go to one now from Garrett. He has a pretty big blockbuster move here. Heston Kjerstad, Enrique Bradfield Jr., Connor Norby, and Alex Pham to the White Sox for maybe the prize pitching acquisition of the trade deadline, Garrett Crochet, and for good measure, the White Sox throwing in Jordan Leisure as well. How would you guys grade this trade?
Crochet is the wild card here with all of these deals and this whole conversation.
How much control does he have left? 2 years
That's a good
after
question.
This, or just one more?
I think 3, but I'll double check.
3 after this year?
2 or 3, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would definitely impact my answer.
Yeah, I failed to look at years control there. I just looked at this year. This is one reason why I would never, ever have the mentality to be a GM, because my wife would agree that she'd be the first to say I tend to overreact and go worst case scenario like all of the time. She's not wrong there. So if I'm Michael, I sit in the warehouse and I get the Kyle Bradish news, I'm calling Chicago and saying, what's the price for Crochet? Rattle off 8 names. Okay, they're on the plane. They're on their way. But realistically, zooming out here, the only thing with Crochet, I love the extra years of control. There's no need to debate if Crochet is a piece you want to add to your roster. He is a piece everybody wants to add to their roster. But for this year, and here's the thing, Corbin Burns a sign for this year. And I feel like this year, I feel way more confident about the Orioles' chances to win a World Series this year, way more confident than I did last year. This year is there for the taking. So I'm a lot more comfortable about pushing big chips in and pulling off a major deal at the deadline. But is Crochet going to be there for you in the playoffs? Because he pitched, where's this at? I had it up here. He's up to 85 innings, over 85 innings already this year. He pitched 24 innings last year between the majors and the minors, none in 2022, obviously injury, 54 in 2021 out of the bullpen, and then the 6 innings in 2020 when the White Sox drafted him and said, congrats, you're now a major leaguer, right after the draft.
Very angels of them.
Can he go for 3 more months and then the playoffs when he's already at pretty much match his career innings in half a season? But like if you've got that extra year control and maybe you make another trade as well and you can maneuver this to where you save him, you're saving him for the end of the year, then yeah, like I'm giving this trade like a solid again, like 60, 65. Go for it. Like Norby he did great. Good job. But Jackson Holiday is still here in this organization. Kobe Mayo is still here in this organization. Kerstad, especially if Santander's back and Ryan O'Hearn are back next year. Kerstad, see ya. Enrique Bradfield, love you as well. Super safe floor, but there aren't many Garrett Crochets out there in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, this is a tough one, tougher for me just because that's a lot to give up for a guy who you're probably trading to be a reliever for the rest of the season in the playoffs. And then you have 2 years of him he's proven he can be an excellent starter in the major leagues, obviously, with this season so far. So I agree with Nick that I feel like this is the best opportunity so far for a World Series winner in Baltimore, with Corbin Burns presumably only here for this year. I don't know. It's probably a fair offer, like value wise. I just don't know if Crochet is even going to be a starter for the rest of the season, second half, playoffs. And if he is he just going under the knife too sooner than later? I'll give it a 45.
I'm going to go 65 because you get Garrett Crochet and Jackson Holiday, Kobe Mayo, and Samuel Basallo are still in your system, as is Cade Povitz, Chase McDermott, Luis De Leon. Go on down the list. This leaves you with, first of all, still a loaded farm system, one of the best in the game. And then you add in a starter who I do share the concerns that you guys have about his workload prior to this year and how that's going to affect him down the stretch. But you've got him for 2 more years after that. You don't have to do a whole lot in the offseason to your rotation because you've got Garrett Crochet now, and you can have him and Rodriguez and hopefully Kyle Bradish as really formidable top of the rotation in 2025. So I would do this deal. And then you throw in Leisure, who maybe the Orioles are able to develop him into a solid reliever, and that gives you one more arm to get the ball to Felix Bautista next year. So I think this actually is my favorite trade on this list. So I'm giving it a solid 65.
Yeah, I will say, like, if they pulled this off, I'd probably be really excited. But my concerns, as I'm having logical brain right now, outweigh that factor. It is totally fair. It looks more like a future than current trade to me.
Yeah, that's this. I mean, I feel like this is a good, really good like conversation type trade offer right there, because the wild card variables there with Crochet. And there's a comment there too from John. He said, I really feel like we need a playoff proven arm. Does that weigh into like any of y'all's considerations when looking at these deals or any other potential deals that other people are coming up with and talking about that? Because like we saw what this team did in the playoffs last year with those young arms who had never been in the playoffs before, and they kind of crumbled there in Baltimore, even at home. I feel a lot more confident that Rodriguez, and we know Corbin Burns is going to be steady, but I feel a lot better about Grayson Rodriguez, like learning from that experience. If Kyle Bradish is healthy and on the mound in the playoffs, I feel really good about Bradish learning from that experience. But I think there's something to be said there too. Like if you're going to go after a guy, and there's another, trade offer there in the chat that we'll get to a little bit later, but does that have any effect when you guys are looking at this stuff?
A little bit for me. I mean, I do think it's a little bit overblown, but at the same time, like some people rise to that pressure and some people need some time to get used to it, and you never know who's going to be who. So
I definitely have some thoughts on this, but I'll save it for a trade that's coming up later on the list.
Well, let's go to Chris Resitar's offer, who says either Basallo or Mayo. All right. Connor Norby plus 2 pitching prospects for Luis Robert. It's always going to be Luis Robert in my mind, and Garrett Crochet. What do you guys feel about this deal?
Again, it's probably fair on paper, but I'm sorry. Luis Robert is hurt all the time. We just talked about Garrett Crochet's question marks. Like, if they're healthy and playing, Luis Robert is a star. There's your center field replacement with Cowser to his right and Kerstead or whoever to his left. That's pretty formidable moving forward for the next few years, because I think he's a guy that had an early extension that has given him some pretty cheap team control going forward. Same with Crochet and Norby and the two pitching prospects. I mean, that seems reasonable, but I'm sorry, I'm just not trading Samuel Basayo or Kirby Mayo. At this point, they are off the I'm just not entertaining it. So unfortunately I have to say no, even though it's probably fair. I'll say 45 again, just because it's fair, but I can't pull the trigger.
Yeah, I settle on a 45 as well, because first of all, my answer would be a lot different depending on who those two pitching prospects are. If it's Alex Pham and Kyle Bradish, my response to it is going to be different than if it's Trace Bright and Luis De Leon going into the deal. So, De Leon and Bright in this package, absolutely not. Bradish and Pham, yeah, I would consider it. To Bob's point, though, I just looked this up about Luis Robert, and it is true. He has a very team-friendly contract signed through 2025, and there's team options to cover 2026 and 2027. But here's his games played. We'll throw out 2020. He appeared in 56 games, shortened season. That's pretty good. Following year, 68 games played. The year after that, 98. Last year, by far the best year of his career, appeared in 145 games. This year so far, he's only been in 19 games because of injuries. That does worry me if I'm looking at him as a long-term piece, which he would be if you're acquiring him with that contract. So as good as he is when he's healthy, that just is too big of a concern in my mind.
Yeah, I love Luis Robert. I made the mistake of drafting a lot of Luis Robert in fantasy and best ball this year, and I regretted it as soon as he got hurt early on in the year. I don't trust it. I don't trust him to stay healthy. And going back to a lot of Bob's points and what we talked about with Garrett Crochet with the last trade offer, I do agree with Bob that I feel like this is a very fair offer and that something the White Sox would be looking for. But like from a fan, as just straight up as a fan perspective, nah, like 30. I'll pass on that one.
Yeah, I keep seeing Samuel Basayo's name floated around, and I'm sorry, it's just he is going to be an international superstar, homegrown from your freshly, like one of your earliest international signing classes. Like, this is so valuable for this organization, just from a look what we can do for future classes that are picking who to sign. Like, it's just a beacon for future success. Not to mention, he's just gonna. I have no doubt he's gonna be an amazing player. Love all the stuff, the shout out he got on Twitter today from the player development account. And yeah, I just think he's the guy you sign to an extension and he's here for 10, 12 years. Just can't do it. So I'll go to the next proposal, which is from The Athletic. I believe it was Jim Bowden, former GM, Trace Bright and Judd Fabian for Luis Severino of the Mets. Nick?
I do like this one. I'm a big Trace Bright guy. He was my prediction before the year started. Orioles minor league pitcher of the year. No, he's not going to win that this year, but he's still having a pretty solid year. Walks are down, strikeouts good. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of Trace Bright this season. Fabian, and I know there's a lot of discussion in Discord today with the Fabian Enrique Bradfield Jr. Conversation there, which I think is an interesting conversation. Fabian, I know he strikes out a lot. I feel like that's the first thing everybody goes to, and for good reason, because the strikeout rate is high, but it's better this year in AA. He's much further removed from that extreme 3 true outcome player he was in AA last year. He's, I think, a much more well-rounded hitter this year. The power is for real. It's there. The Orioles clearly loved him. The defense is really, really good, an underrated aspect of his game. But Luis Severino has also been pretty good for the Mets this year. And I kind of like bringing him into the organization. You've got Enrique Bradfield Jr. still there. You got Dylan Beavers still there. I'm okay with parting with one of those outfielders plus a pitching prospect who is only in AA with a lot of question marks for a guy like Severino, who's been around the block. He's pitched in New York. He's pitched in the big markets, and he's having success this year. I'm going a solid like 60 with this offer, and I would do it.
I'll go with the 55. The only thing that I would make the grade higher is if Severino had another year of control at least, or at least a team option after this year. But I think that this is a fair trade for all the reasons that Nick touched on. I don't want to part with Trace Bright if I don't have to, but you've still got a lot of other arms in this system that can develop. And not to mention, Jackson Baumeister looks like he could be Trace Bright 2.0 in Aberdeen right now. And then with Fabian, you still have Enrique Bradfield Jr. You still have Colton Cowser, who, by the way, has actually looked pretty good in center field when he's gotten the opportunities this year. And I think that Fabian's undoubtedly going to be a major leaguer. But the hit tool is really the divider between him being an everyday center fielder versus a fourth or fifth outfielder that plays 1 or 2 days a week. So there's some risk there. So I think that this is a fair trade.
Not for me, dog. I can't do it. Maybe I'm the prospect hoarder, but hey, Mike Elias is with me at least so far to date, I think. I don't know. Luis Severino just doesn't do it for me. I'd rather give up more for someone better than lose these guys who the value isn't there right now to really get you a big name. But I feel like with a few more improvements, a few more months or a year of development, could be guys that even if you're going to trade them next year when the value's even higher. So I'll give it a 45 again.
We have had a couple of proposals come in from our live audience, so thank you. And Bob, you want to bring those up on the screen? So Orioles Birdwatcher says, any way to get Jesus Luzardo with Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo, and obviously Jackson Holliday off the table, like Heston Kjerstad, Connor Norby, and a smaller prospect. Nick, what are your thoughts there?
If Jesus Luzardo is healthy, yes. If Jesus Luzardo is healthy and you can trade him for him without giving up Basayo or Mayo, and obviously Holiday, absolutely. But I don't think he's healthy. And for that reason, I don't think the Orioles are going to end up making a move there. It's just, I don't know the health status. I think a lefty coming to Camden Yards, I do think his year hasn't been great. I know he's already had some injuries this year, but I feel like that's a guy that you can bring into the organization, tinker with, and his ceiling is even higher. And he would be an unbelievable piece to add to this roster. But I have questions about the health, which is my only hesitation.
Yeah, I agree. Again, I would probably make that trade just in terms of the next 2 years after the season. I don't know how much it's going to help this year just because I think his velocity was down early. He had an arm injury. Turns out MRI came back clean. Now he's kind of banged up again. So I'd probably make it, but I think you're still going to have to make more trades to help the current team.
Yeah, I agree. The health does worry me a little bit just because Luzardo does have a fairly extensive history of injuries prior to this year, but there's no question that the ceiling is really high. And we'll go now to the last trade proposal here, which is from Adi. Would you do Dylan Beavers, Trace Bright, and an international arm in low A for Justin Verlander if given the guarantee that he will waive the no trade clause and his neck spasms are no big deal? Now, Verlander undoubtedly going to the Hall of Fame when he retires, going in first ballot, and has playoff experience, although his track record is a little bit mixed in the playoffs. So, Bob, would you do this trade?
I think I would. I think I give this trade like a 55. I think, again, it's got to be intimidating for other teams if you're scheduled to go up against Corbin Burns, Justin Verlander, and Grayson Rodriguez in the playoffs. I mean, obviously Verlander's old in baseball terms and, maybe not what he once was, but I do think he is still able to be successful, especially he seems like a guy that can just come up big, like a Max Scherzer. He'd be our Max Scherzer edition, just like the Rangers got him last year, and I don't think he helped them, but maybe it would go better for the Orioles. And then I honestly think, if nothing else, Grayson Rodriguez, to have Corbin Burns and Justin Verlander in the locker room to learn off of, just lock in Grayson Rodriguez for like ace material from 2025 to 2030 for the Orioles.
Yeah, I like this deal. I always have a soft spot for Verlander, like ODU kid, 757. I like it, but I think this goes back to the point earlier, like that playoff experience. Like, how much of that do you weigh? Is that something that you put a value on? And for that instance, like I do think with this young staff, it could be a help. Like Corbin Burns is already there though, and we've heard over and over again how much of an impact Corbin Burns is having on the rest of the staff. So like, is that a necessity? No, but like Verlander's been there numerous times. He has numerous World Series rings. Like I do think he could be an asset, and like this is the year. You don't need to push all the chips in and say, all right, Samuel Basallo is up for trade. Who wants him? But like I'm fine with giving up a Dylan Beavers for a Justin Verlander, knowing this is it. Can we get 3 good months out of Justin Verlander? If he would say yes, and wasn't there a thing with like his brother saying he did sign off that he would come to Baltimore? So I don't think there's any concern there. I don't know. I kind of like it. I would do it. As long as he's healthy and he checks the boxes, I'm good with Verlander. There's actually, I don't know if Zach, you had more thoughts about Verlander there, but there is one more from Garrett in there that I kind of like.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick about Verlander. I would do that trade 55. It's this is not the Justin Verlander that's won multiple Cy Young awards. There's no question about that, but he can still be really valuable for you down the stretch. And again, you make that trade and your system is still loaded. So you have a guy with playoff experience who has Verlander's resume paired with Corbin Burns and Grayson Rodriguez. That's a really, really good playoff rotation. And that's, one of them can have a bad night in a longer series, and the other 2 guys will be there the next 2 starts to pick him up. So, yeah, I would do this trade.
Yeah, that one. Would you entertain Alex Pham and Billy Cook for Jack Flaherty again? And if that's all it would take, yes, do it.
Yeah,
I'm down.
Yeah, I agree. If that's the cost, I think, yeah. And I mean, obviously they know what he was in the clubhouse. If it was overblown, people saying he doesn't look like he's vibing. I mean, I'll let the team decide that. And I honestly would give it another shot. He's looked fantastic this year.
Yeah, he has. And this has been a fun exercise. And, of course, we'll have more coverage of the trade deadline leading up to July 30th. So we'll have more to say on this, but this was a fun exercise for this episode. And we've got a lot more coming this week. On our next episode, we're going to look at Matt Horvath's recent breakout, and we're going to talk about park effects a little bit. And then our final episode later on this week, we will take questions from our listeners as part of our latest mailbag episode. In the meantime, you can find us on our multitude of social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com, and sign up to become a member of our Patreon community. You can join for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels have access to exclusive dailies from Bob, Nick, and myself. And we're not too far out from our July Top 50 Prospects update, so now is a good time to get in there. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to break down one of the latest breakout candidates in the Orioles farm system, and that is Matt Horvath, who is having a really good start to June. And then we're going to get into park effects a little bit, talking about some recent findings published by Baseball America. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Finals this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, the game starts here. We'll now talk about Matt Horvath, who has overcome a slow start to the season to have a scorching month of June, with Sunday's game included. Horvath is hitting .319, .385 with a 3.19 with a .385 on base percentage and a .638 slugging percentage to go with 3 home runs. Along the way, Horvath, even amid his slow start, maintained very good strikeout to walk numbers. So we were hopeful that a breakout was coming, and it seems that is the case now with Horvath. Even while the overall stat line doesn't look great, you dig deeper and you realize that he's overcome a slow start to put together a solid season to this point. And we're now wondering, after seeing Connor Norby and Colton Cowser overcome slow starts at Aberdeen 2 years ago, and Dylan Beaver overcome a similar slow stretch last year, is Matt Horvath the breakout player of the second half in 2024? Bob, you had a chance to catch the Ironbirds over the weekend. You were on the air, so first off, tell us about that experience, but then tell us what you saw of Matt Horvath.
Oh, that was so much fun to be able to do that, and thank you to Michael Marcantonini, sorry for butchering your last name. I know it's a mouthful. My last name is not easy to say either if you just read it. That Matt Horvath didn't really do anything of note Saturday night when I went, but it was a really cool experience. I'll talk about some thoughts on the starting pitcher later on from that game. Great angle, great view, I'll tell you that. And to be able to look to my right, oh, here's the TV screen monitor. It was nice. And I would go back anytime to do it again. Recommend anyone out there do it if you get the chance. I don't know how that will come about, but definitely was good. And Matt Horvath, the thing to keep in mind is, and I noticed this when I was looking at Enrique Bradfield's numbers Saturday night, he had a 720 OPS going into Saturday's game, which was still a 104 WRC plus. And Horvath, even after a slowish weekend, despite being hot of late, batting .230 with the 741 OPS on the season, that's still a 107 WRC plus. That's still 7% better than league average. So you have to keep league context into account when you're looking at these guys. And I think he's put his troubles in the rearview mirror. Like you said, the walk rate's still really solid, 11.3%. Strikeout rate is only 20.8, which is 5-6% lower than it was last year in a great season that he had. BABIP's a little bit low. ISO, we know he's got more in a tank. So, this is a guy that could play second base, third base, corner, outfield. I'm still super high on Matt Horvath.
Yeah, I didn't see any reason to be pessimistic about Horvath for any reason, or see any reason to move him down in the rankings after the first 2 months of his first full pro season. In my opinion, it wouldn't matter if he waited until August to start hitting. I don't think my opinion was going to change, just because the power's there, the speed is there, the defense is there, defensive versatility is there. He plays multiple positions. I really noticed him playing third base a lot early on in the year, and when I would watch him, he played really good third base at the start of the year. The hit tool does have big question marks. It's what kept him at UNC for an additional year and bypassed the first year he was draft eligible, but his start in Aberdeen didn't really cause me to blink an eye. And as John Mioli pointed out, he's written about Horvath, I think a couple of times at Baseball America, and how Horvath loves being in the system and is thriving with the hitting drills that they're doing. And it seems like he is a really solid fit for this organization, behind the scenes. And I think he deserves a pretty long runway. And I actually looked, I just used the past month. I know you can always pick a random date and start looking at stats from there. Whatever helps your story, helps prove your point. But I just did the past month. And so from the start of the season through May 17th, we use the last month as a parameter here. Horvath was hitting just 196, but he had a 15% walk rate and 17% strikeout rate. And 9 of his 19 hits went for extra bases. So I look at his college resume, the draft capital, and I see those numbers, and I'm looking forward to a breakout. And in the 1 month since then, so since May 17th, He's hitting 267. The OPS is up to 823, and he has a 125 WRC plus, which is up from 94 WRC plus he had the first 2.5 months of the year. He's walking less and striking out more, but he's hitting for much more power. And I think this breakout is sustainable. And I think just it matches what you watch. When you watched him on a near nightly basis down in Aberdeen, like I saw a lot of great at bats. Maybe he was 0 for 4, but we've had players on the show talk about the reports they get after the games and how many at bats you won, how many times you barreled the ball, and they're all excited about they want to be on the barrel leaderboard each night. And I feel like Horvath checked a lot of boxes most nights, even though he'd go 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. I felt good about watching a lot of his at bats. You could pick out 1 or 2 each game where you're like, he looked good there. The results just weren't there. He stuck to the course, and the results have been there. It's why I love watching minor league baseball every night, and why I love doing this, and why I think you miss out a lot when you just scout the stat line. And with Horvath, I think he's an example of missing a lot. I really do think he was second round draft pick, drafted very early for many reasons. And I think this breakout is for real and it's going to continue.
Honestly, I got to see him play at second base on Saturday. He looked pretty smooth out there. And I know Michael was telling me that he feels more comfortable at third base. I mean, there was a play where a ball deflected. He had to redirect and gather himself, make a strong throw. To me, he looked good at second base. Obviously, very short sample size, but I was happy with what I saw defensively.
Yeah, I think that Horvath has definitely been one of those players that you can't take the first couple months of this year and downgrade him. As we've done our monthly updates, I've kind of held steady. And part of it was that there were some glimmers in the stat line, even when he was struggling, that made me believe that he was going to bounce back. And the other thing is that this is just a really athletic player. Everything that Nick said about his ability to barrel the ball, I fully agree with. And his speed probably doesn't get talked about enough, because since he's come into the system, 70 games so far as a professional player, and this is as of Monday night, he's 33 for 34 in stolen base attempts, which includes a perfect 19 for 19 this year. And he kind of fits, when we were talking about the draft class last year, in the aftermath of the Orioles focusing on speed, Enrique Bradfield Jr. was the biggest part of that conversation for obvious reasons, but Horvath is not too far behind Bradfield. Maybe he doesn't have that elite speed, but he's a good base runner who is good with stolen bases. So he's just a really good athlete who is probably still a little raw at this point, but he checks a lot of boxes, and at the rate he's going to turn 23 next month. Maybe he's in Bowie by the end of this year. I think there's going to be a lot to feel good about with his season when it's over.
Yeah. And it's why, we're not going to talk about the draft, but there's a lot of draft conversations obviously happening in Discord, a lot of mock drafts coming out. We're getting close. It's fun to think about. His college teammate, Vance Honeycutt, hit tool is 20, 30 grade hit tool. It's not that good. But he does a lot of other things very, very well. Matt Horvath is that type of player. The hit tool has question marks, but he does a lot of other things very, very well. Dylan Beavers type, to bring it to an Orioles example, the Orioles drafted Dylan Beavers knowing that they're going to have to overhaul that swing and that hit tool. And I feel like that's the case with Horvath as well. But for this organization to feel comfortable enough to draft him where they did out of UNC when so many other teams bypassed him because of the hit tool, I feel pretty good about. And after watching him this year and seeing these numbers he's putting up, I feel pretty good about what we could eventually see from Horvath as a utility type guy up at the major league level, especially as he continues to play more defensive positions.
Let's go now into park effects. Baseball America published this recently, and we always like to dig into this, which, first of all, they do wonderful work. If you're not a subscriber yet, you should be one. But it's always interesting because the park effects have a way of checking our assumptions. And some of the things that we learned this year, for instance, Aberdeen maybe not as pitcher-friendly as we always believe it is. Norfolk can be really tough on left-handed hitters. So, Nick, I know that you were excited when this came out and you were able to kind of pick it apart a little bit. What stood out to you?
A lot. It did confirm a lot of things that we always talk about. And something surprised me, though. So my notes that I jotted down from this were that Norfolk is a very pitcher-friendly park. And like they included like park factors for like WOBA, hits, singles, BABIP. I think it was only like 5 or 6 categories. But like Norfolk's like middle of the pack in terms of like WOBA, weighted on base average, 7th lowest in AAA with a 96 park factor, 100 being league average. It's like it's one of the worst in the International League for hitters in that metric. Righties, it's better, but for lefties, it's like near the bottom of the pack. Harbor Park is a tough place to hit for lefties. Again, righties a little bit better. Bowie, we knew that it's very kind to hitters. That is very true. Like 108 park factor for WOBA, at or above 100 across the board. Lefties, a little bit more difficult, but pretty neutral across the board for lefties, righties. We knew hitters were going to thrive in Bowie. The bigger issue has been at Harbor Park because that wind. In right field, you have the wind coming off the river. I've watched countless balls over the last 25 years going to games at Harbor Park. Balls just get caught up in that right field wind and just die. You think they're long gone, and they fall 10 feet short of the warning track. These park factors kind of prove a lot of those assumptions, except I did not think Norfolk was going to be as pitcher-friendly as it is. Aberdeen and Delmarva is where it gets fun. Aberdeen is actually pretty hitter-friendly. It's tough for righties. Aberdeen has a 110 park factor for singles, 106 for BABIP, 101 for WOBA. So hitter-friendly. Lefties, a little bit easier than righties. I'm not sure why that would be, to be certain, but I think the effect at Aberdeen is bigger than the park factor. It's what we've talked about before. Like, it's guys in their first full year of pro ball. They're undergoing changes to their swing. They're having to swing in uncomfortable positions that they're not used to. They got to get used to that. Go back to Colton Cowser when it was in Aberdeen. He talked about sleep was an issue. Learning how to sleep as a pro baseball player was hard for him. I think it goes beyond park factors when you're at Aberdeen, and you can't really just say, oh, Aberdeen is a tough place to play or to hit, because actually it's really not. I do think, based on some conversations we've had with players, that there are some other things, like there was the lighting issue, some batter's eye issues, I think, that maybe they could have fixed to help out, but it's not the park factor. And then Delmarva is brutal. Delmarva is one of the most pitcher-friendly parks in all of low A. It's a park factor of 93 for hits, which was the second worst in low A. It's slightly better for righties, but it is the worst park in low A to hit at if you are a lefty. And there are a lot of those in Delmarva right now. So not only are you seeing a roster full of like 19-year-old international players making major life adjustments and learning probably more about life off the field than actually baseball on the field, like they're playing at one of the most pitcher-friendly parks in low A. So like, give the kids a little bit of a break if they're struggling down there in Delmarva.
Aaron Estrada looking even more impressive after hearing that. I mean, Aberdeen, it does make a little bit of sense that it could be more hitter-friendly than you would assume, just because it's a wide open gap-to-gap stadium. You know, there's a lot of room to hit a gap, get some hits to fall in, use your speed for some doubles and triples. But yeah, especially for righties, unless you're going to crank it directly down the foul line, it's pretty tough. Yeah. Very interesting stuff. I always love seeing the park factors, and it's kind of strange to me and fascinating that they kind of slowly change over time, even with no changes to the park itself.
I guess Norfolk and Bowie are probably the least surprising for me, because we've known that Norfolk's reputation over the years skews pitcher friendly. And as we've heard before from guests on this show, that it's especially pitcher friendly in the early months of the year when the weather is cold. Nick mentioned the wind coming in off the river. Balls just really don't carry there like they do at other ballparks. Bowie, definitely hitter friendly. Delmarva is interesting, because I remember when I was covering low A, talking to players about Delmarva, and hitters would get frustrated because they felt like they had to get the ball perfectly down the line for it to get out. Because down the line, you kind of had a short porch, but then when you get into the power alleys, it is a little bit deeper. So it's not I guess it's not surprising to me that it leans towards pitchers, but I was not expecting it to be as drastic as it is in some of the numbers that Nick mentioned.
Yeah. I just remember Gunner when he was down there in Delmarva, like that first week of the year, and he cranked a home run. I think it was like opposite field into like the left center field gap. And I think it was one of the I can't remember who it was. Someone that was like, I have never seen anyone hit a home, any lefty hit a home run to that part of the ballpark ever. And Gunnar hit it with ease. Little did we know that Gunnar Henderson would become the Gunnar Henderson that we now know. But yeah, I think, take these for what they are. It's another piece of the puzzle. It doesn't explain everything, but I do think that it is fun to look at and see, all right, when you get down there in Delmarva and understand that, like Bob mentioned, Aaron Estrada, Thomas Sosa, who's hitting well. Like if I'm seeing a 19-year-old kid hit the ball well and have immediate success down there in Delmarva, where it's harder to hit and more pitcher friendly, I'm taking more notice, right? And if righties or lefties are struggling in Norfolk, I'm going to take that with a slight grain of salt, especially if they have the resume behind it. There are many other factors you got to take into account there, but it is something fun to look at. And the biggest thing for me was Aberdeen, that it actually is pretty hitter friendly down there, and that what we've said for years is true. It's a lot more than that. There are some major changes happening to these guys at that high A level. And so those guys who break out, like Matt Horvath we just talked about, those guys who truly break out and find their way up to Bowie pretty quickly, I think you got to pay attention, because those guys are legit and they're moving up quickly to Bowie for many reasons.
Absolutely. And with that, now we'll get into the final segment of our episode where we shout out a player outside the top 30 portion of our top 50 list for something they've done recently, whether it's been a good week, a good game, or maybe there's just something interesting in their stat line that we want to mention. And since Bob brought this up at the top of the show, I'll let him start this week with his pitcher.
Yeah. I want to say I have not been impressed with Levi Wells this season so far, to be honest. I haven't watched much of I have seen a little bit of him on MILB TV, not too much. Stat lines, obviously, they don't look great, but he's legit. I've changed my mind. Seeing him live in person probably helps that he started off so strong Saturday night, but my goodness, touching 97 with the fastball, blowing hitters away. His line looks way worse than it should have at the end of the day. He retired the first 8 batters, and then I think it was a walk to the 9th batter. Creed Willems throws a strike to second base on a stolen base attempt. It was clear as day he was out. The ball beat him there. Tag was there. Calls him safe. Next batter doubles. Batter after that homers. So, that kind of screwed him up there. And I think there was also an error on Douglas Hodo the following inning where it was like right at him, but the sun was in his eyes, hit off his glove, went for a 2-base error or something like that. It was just some sloppy umpire calls / defense did not go his way, but man, his stuff looked crisp. Slider looked great. Fastball had hop, as you could say. The Orioles love it for a reason. Was just very impressed by Levi Wells. And honestly, the more I was looking into him, obviously the walks have to come down. That's for sure. But his ERA is 6.92. His xFIP is 4.04. He has a very high BABIP. It is 359, was the highest of all Ironbirds pitchers this year. His home run to fly ball ratio is 17.2%, which from research in the past, 8 to 12% is basically what it should be. It's not controlled by the pitcher, apparently, between BABIP and home run fly ball rate, the two things that the pitcher cannot control. Very unlucky. If you look at his numbers in Jackson Ballmeister, I don't know if they're that much different, honestly, when you really dig into it. So, Levi Wells, I apologize for sleeping on you, and you're back on my radar in a big way.
So, did you get to see the TrackMan stuff? Was that over there? Did you get some exit velo data for us?
I unfortunately did not. I asked Michael about that. I think might be on its way someday, but wasn't there yet. So, missed out there, but that's okay. Next time I'm in Aberdeen, I'll just have to find some scouts or some, like one time I just happened to sit behind someone that had their computer up and had all the StatCast data. That was a good find. Got to do that again. But I guess I'll go with my hitter from here, Jordan Sanchez, my guy, apparently, just because I keep bringing him up because we heard he signed for $500,000 and then it was just like, well, where is he? He didn't show up until this season in the FC, or not even the FCL, DSL. What am I talking about? And I think safe to say he's better than the competition in the DSL. the numbers I'm about to read from Fangraphs do not include today's game where he was like 3 for 5 with a double and a triple. 168 WRC plus, 345 batting average, OPS over 1,000, ISO 241, walk rate 17%, strikeout rates 22.9%. Yeah, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on from here on out, and wish he could get up to the FCL, maybe even Delmarva this year, but he'll probably just stay in the DSL like I talked about in the past for well, I don't know. If he signed last year, maybe there is a chance of that. But I know they keep these guys in Dominican Summer League longer than they probably should a lot of times just for tax purposes. So we will see, but I'm excited about Jordan Sanchez.
Yeah, his box scores have been phenomenal to start the year. I'm going to go with Jake Cunningham. I think he took a pretty big dip on our top 50, and he saw the list, and he was not happy. So but to be fair, he was probably the biggest disappointment to begin the year after a lot of hype initially. I was very high on him coming into the draft. I loved when he was actually the pick by the Orioles. I loved it even more when Brad Selick, still love you, Brad, even though you're in DC, rained praise on Cunningham afterwards, saying they felt like the Orioles felt like they got a lot of value on him when falling. Felt like he said the tool shed thing, and we took it and ran with it. But he labeled him the tool shed. But he was hurt his last year at Charlotte. He got hurt again right at the start of this season, his first full pro year. So, I was like, he deserves a little bit longer runway. We'll see if he can turn it around. And this past week, he went 7 for 17. So a 412 average with pair of doubles, 2 stolen bases, 3 walks, and just 3 strikeouts. And he had the second most number of at-bats in Delmarva last week. So just the 3 strikeouts was nice to see. I'm not saying the breakout's here, but I hope this is a springboard type week for him, and we see more good weeks like this out of him over the next month or so. And my pitcher, sticking with Delmarva, and Nestor Herman missed a month due to an unknown injury. Obviously, he's low A, so we don't know. But returned last week to Delmarva, where he had just a 2-inning start, but he did not allow a hit. He walked 1 and he struck out 5. So he's pitched 26 innings this season, and that's after missing a month. Has a 1.37 ERA, 34 strikeouts, a 152 average against, and a whip under 1. He didn't pitch last year after the Orioles drafted him in the 11th round out of Seattle. So smaller school guy. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know if you guys know any more about him, but I don't know his velo. I don't know his pitch mix. He is the mystery man in this organization. He wasn't on Joe Doyle's top 600 draft prospect list last year. 600 names deep. Nestor Herman was not on that list. And Joe Doyle is a Washington guy. Joe Doyle does great work, but Washington prospects, West Coast prospects, that's his territory. And he did not have Nestor Herman on that list. But I did find a tweet. We've shared it before, but I don't know who this guy is, but his resume looks pretty impressive. Like he knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to trust him. But he had a tweet of overall full Arsenal stuff plus last year in the college ranks. So full Arsenal stuff plus in college last year. Top 10 list. Number 1 on that list, Hurston Waldrop. Great guy. RIP is on the IL right now. But he was number 1 overall. Paul Skeens, number 2. Decent pitcher. We'll see if he ever becomes anything. Brody Brecht was at number 3. First round potential pick this year at Iowa. Number 4 was Nestor Herman. What the hell? And then it was Jamie Arnold out of FSU, and then Chase Burns were 5 and 6 on that list. So we need to get Nestor Herman on the show. John Mioli, write the Nestor Herman piece, please. Orioles PR, I know you're listening. Feed that name to Steve Molesky. Get him to interview Nestor Herman. We need more information about Nestor because he's pitching well. So.
Yeah, I love those picks just because I want Jay Cunningham to work the tool shed. He's got to put the tools together. But yeah, Nestor Herman. I just love this organization can take him in the 11th round, sign Troy Gibson, and we're like, oh, I don't know. And then 2 months later, we're like, top 50 prospects, let's go with a bullet.
Absolutely. I'll go now to my guys, and I'll go with the hitter. And he makes this segment a lot because he's a guy who runs really hot and cold, and that's Elio Prado. And last week, he was really good. 6-game series against Hickory, goes 8 for 21 at the plate with 2 doubles, 3 walks to 3 strikeouts. That's good for a 381 stretch, 381 batting average during that stretch. Overall numbers for Prado this year are still not great, but at just 22 years old, he shows some real potential. And just like what Nick said about Cunningham, I hope that this week is a little bit of a springboard week for Prado, because when he's on, he's one of the more intriguing prospects at that level. And then I'm going to go down to the DSL for my pitcher this week. Killer Morphe had a very good start against DSL Rojos, the Reds affiliate. 3 1/3 scoreless innings on Saturday with 3 strikeouts, no walks, while scattering 2 hits. Morphe was signed out of Venezuela by the Orioles in last year's international free agent class and played in the DSL last year and struggled a little bit. But at just 17 years old, flash potential at times, back there this year at only 18. And so far through 2 outings, he's pitched 5 1/3 innings, 7 strikeouts to just 2 walks, only 2 hits allowed in that span. So very, very small sample size. But so far, he's missing bats. The strikeouts are up. The walks are down. You have to like that trajectory for the young right-hander. Let's hope that keeps up.
Yeah, I was commenting on Prado. I like Prado a lot. He's got all the tools to be a 5-tool guy. It kind of reminds me of Steven Acevedo, who is having a pretty good season so far. But just consistency. If he could be consistent, he'd be much higher on the list, obviously.
Absolutely. And that does it for this episode. We will be back later this week to take questions from our listeners as part of our mailbag segment. In the meantime, you can find us on our multitude of social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, head over to our Patreon community and become a member. You can sign up as a paying member for as little as $3 a month, and then at the $5 and $10 levels, have access to exclusive bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. And we're only a couple weeks out from our updated top 50 prospects list for the month of July. So you'll want to make sure that you're in there in time to hear that. For Bob Phil and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Sweden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Sweden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we take questions about all things Orioles from our listeners in our latest mailbag episode. We're going to talk about prospects as well as some possible extensions for the Major League team. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for the NBA Finals and Stanley Cup Finals this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Now, for various reasons, we haven't done a mailbag segment in a couple of weeks. We had John Mioli on last week, and then the week before that, we cut our main episodes short so that we could do our top 50 prospects update. So it's been a few weeks since we did a mailbag, and our listeners came back pretty strong. I'm going to start with this question from Billy B, because this is a fun one. If you could go back and get a do-over with a previously failed prospect, who would you give the second chance to? I'll start with Bob here.
Yeah, that's interesting. If you take this front office's player development and scouting and all that stuff with the former failed prospect, that is very tough. I would say I'm thinking along the lines of a pitcher, because pitcher development was Jake Arrieta. If Jake Arrieta came up through this system now, I think they would have utilized him a much better, got him to be the Cubs Arrieta in Orioles land, Birdland. That will be my official pick, but I will continue to think on this as you guys answer.
So this question led me to go back to recent top prospect list for the Orioles, which is fun. fun exercise to do and think about the good old days when Randolph Gasaway was a top 30 prospect and Irvin Ortega was like a top 20 prospect. Adrian Marie, the names, we go on and on. I have a few in mind, but they're mostly guys just like I personally just love them. And I kept it more recent. I didn't go back like 15, 20 years. I kept it to like the last 5 to 10 years. And so, like, a guy like Ofelke Peralta, I would just love to have a redo with him, but I know like he is what he is. He's probably going to flame out again in AA or AAA. But there was a pitcher who I thought I kind of would like to see the Orioles retry with him, Matthias Dietz, a second round pick out of the JUCO ranks in 2016. This guy was a 6'5", 200 plus pound kid who was one of the top strikeout arms in the country in JUCO. And then he comes out and I wrote the numbers down here. Pulled it up. This guy's got like a fastball who's in the upper 90s, good slider. A lot of great reports about the fastball coming out of the draft. His first year in Delmarva, he walked 50 guys in 129 innings, struck out 92. The next year, 2018, he split between Delmarva and Frederick. He walked 75 guys. So he walked 25 more guys and in 25 fewer innings. And then in 2019, he went back to Frederick. He walked 54 batters in 37 innings. So not good. The pandemic hit in 2020, and then he got cut before the 2021 season. Actually got picked up by the Angels, and they put him in AA, and he pitched pretty well, but they cut him. And then he did indie ball for like a couple of weeks. And then I don't think he's pitched professionally since 2021. I tried to find out what he was doing, but it's just like a locked Instagram page of him just like holding up a fish. So I don't think he's like playing baseball anymore. I think that describes his life at this point. I would like to see Matthias Dietz go again with the Orioles. 100 plus mile per hour fastball, a good slider. Would he be the eighth inning guy in Baltimore right now? And another guy I wanted to shout out real quick, Jomar Reyes. Like I loved watching this guy in Frederick. He was there for 4 years, so we got to watch a lot of him in Frederick. And yeah, there was the punching the wall incident. He preferred to punch walls, cement walls, than like hit baseballs. But in 2019, Eric Longenhagen actually said that Reyes wasn't a top prospect anymore, but he had a 70 grade arm at third base, insane raw power, and he was worth one last look because the Elias regime coming in. Obviously, it didn't work out. He got cut. But this guy was the third-ranked prospect in the Orioles system at one point. It was Hunter Harvey in 2016. It was Hunter Harvey, Dylan Bundy, Jomar Reyes was number 3. That's insane. Ryan Mountcastle was 8, Tanner Scott 11. It's fun. I love going through all of this. But yeah, I would say Matthias Dietz and Jomar Reyes as far as like more recent guys go. But shout out to Jomar Reyes, who in researching this question, he's still playing for Evansville in Indie Ball and having pretty good seasons. So that's pretty cool. Keep the dream alive, man. Glad you're hopefully you're not punching any cement walls and dugouts, but good for Jomar.
Yeah, I'll go with Jomar Reyes too. I remember seeing Reyes at Delmarva. I'm trying to remember what year that was, 2012 maybe. And feeling like, all right, just give it a year or two, let the power tick up, and he's going to hit his way to the major leagues. And then he just couldn't get past Frederick. And I do wonder if you put him with this regime, what he would have been able to accomplish. A couple of other guys that came to mind, I really thought Brian Mattis was going to have a better major league career than he did. And you saw flashes of it in his rookie season, but I remember seeing him pitch at Frederick in 2009 and watching this guy with this really good curveball, could put the fastball wherever he wanted, and thinking, all right, this is where the pitching woes of this player development system end. Unfair in hindsight to put that on one guy, but I thought Mattis had a good chance to do it. And although he was able to salvage his career a little bit as a reliever, I think that this regime would have been able to get a better version of Brian Mattis than the previous regime did. And then Parker Bridwell was a guy that I remember having really good stuff coming up through the minor leagues, but you would look at the results year in and year out, and much like Matthias Dietz, who Nick just talked about, generally weren't that good. Delmarva, 2012, 114 innings. He walked 63 batters and only struck out 71, but you could tell his stuff was a lot better than that. Unfortunately from him, he went from the Orioles to the Angels. And although he got a taste in the major leagues, the Angels don't really have a great track record of developing pitching. And I kind of wonder, like, if he had been in the system now, what he would have been able to do. Because it always just felt like the stuff was better than the results year in and year out for him.
That is a good choice. I have an even better choice in my first one. Tall, right-handed pitcher, over-the-top delivery, great velocity, Daniel Cabrera. I feel like he is either Felix Bautista or a great starter in with this player development system we have now. So, yeah, unfortunately, never. I mean, he had some flashes, but never really broke out in a big way, which I always thought he was going to. But I think Mike Elias would like the big right-hander in Daniel Cabrera.
I'm over here now going through this list again, and I'm still seeing Joe Reyes on the 2018 list with Cedric Mullins, Austin Hayes, Mountcastle, Santander, so many names. Adam Hall, Lamar Sparks, Nestor Cortez. Hey, buddy. All right, we can move on before I could spend 2 hours doing this. Let's go to the bird is the word, who says, if you can only sign one of Adley or Gunnar, who would you choose? I feel like this is pretty easy one to answer.
I like the way, I think it was Garrett in the Discord said, if you can sign Gunnar, there's no reason you can't sign both. So that seems good to me. But yeah, if following the rules of the question, it's Gunnar, no doubt, of course. I mean, look, we love Adley. Yeah, would love to lock him up as well. And I wouldn't be mad if it was Adley instead of Gunnar. Well, I kind of would, but just sign one at least. But Gunnar is 22 years old, already an MVP candidate. Looks like a potential Gold Glover at shortstop, if not now, at some point soon. Yeah, I'll take that for the next 10, 15 years. No doubt about it.
Yeah, it's Gunnar, just for all the reasons that Bob mentioned. And then if you compare him to Adley, the two things that Gunnar has going for him are, one, his age, and two, that he plays a less risky position. And although Joe Mauer is going into the Hall of Fame, his contract extension with the Twins is kind of the cautionary tale of what can happen for catchers. I don't know that would necessarily happen with Adley, because Mauer was really tied specifically to injury more than what people realized at the time. But you do have that risk that you could give Adley a 10-year contract and maybe only half of that he's behind the plate. But they're sign them both. Just sign them both. But yeah, if I can only have one, I'm taking Gunnar.
Yeah. It's June 17th, and he's already matched his 4.7 F4 of last year. So that is pretty insane. I think it was the latest episode of Rates and Barrels, one of their more recent ones. I think it was Katie Wu. I believe she's a beat writer for the Cardinals for The Athletic. But she was talking about how she saw Gunnar Henderson play for the first time this year. And they had a little discussion about how underrated he is nationally, which I feel like I get why. But I feel like at some point when you start talking about the greatest players in the game today, you got to start talking about Gunnar Henderson. And I don't think this is a Homer Orioles take in thinking that there's still a bigger ceiling with Gunnar. I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can be. And that is frightening, because he is already just about a 5 F4 player, and it is June 17th.
Yeah, and I also saw some, obviously, rumor central here, so take it with a large grain of salt, but some smoke going up that the Orioles are willing to go to $400+ million in extension with Gunnar, but Scott Boras says, talk to me in the offseason. We don't negotiate in season. So that's interesting. And here's a follow-up. If you could only have one of 3 generational shortstops in the American League, they're very, very similar, all have very similar value. Who are you taking, Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr., or Anthony Volpe? They're very similar. All right, 2-person race. Who you got, Witt or Gunnar? I'm going Gunnar just because he's our guy.
Yeah, I love Bobby Witt. I will watch Royals games just to watch him. He's one of those guys that's like, you got to enjoy it. Like, we are alive and get to watch Bobby Witt Jr. play baseball, and that is a treat. But Gunnar Henderson, lock him down, make him an Oriole for life. I don't ever want to see him in another uniform until he's like 39 and on his last leg and just trying to live out the dream for one more year. Go have fun. But until then, like, you're an Oriole for life.
I agree with Nick. It's Gunnar. I loved watching Bobby Witt Jr. too, but there's not much of a comparison in my mind between those guys.
Thought for sure you would say Volpe, Zach. You seem like a Volpe guy. But all right, how about another one of these type of questions? Ben would like to know, if not Adley, Gunnar, or Corbin Burns, who is number one on your wish list to extend? Go straight back to Zach.
I'll go with Jackson Holiday. And I know that initial trip through the majors didn't go well, but he's going to be a really good player in this league for a long time. And you look at, let's say that he does end up playing second base his entire career, what he's going to be able to do offensively at that position, I just don't think that there's going to be a comparison anywhere else in the game. And there are so many players that you could choose here. You could choose Kobe Mayo. You could choose Samuel Basallo. I even thought about going with Grayson Rodriguez, but buying out the remainder of his contract, so through his arbitration years. But for me, it's Holiday.
You go first, Bob. I'm going to see what you say first, and that will dictate my answer.
There are a lot of great choices. And yes, obviously, in a perfect situation, you're going position player over pitcher, just because we know the epidemic of injuries. I think I'm going Kobe Mayo. I'm going Mayo. I think, the power, he can play third base when he comes up. He can transfer over to first base at some point, right field, DH. It don't matter. That power bat is going to play for the next 10, 15 years. And I just think he's a little bit is underrated as a top 10 prospect in baseball can get. He's a cornerstone on the likes of Gunnar and Adley for me. So make it three of them. Holiday, obviously, and yeah, Basallo on a Jackson Chorio type contract. That would have been my second choice. But give me that. And Holiday can just play it out, and he's probably not going to resign. So if I had to choose between Holiday and Mayo on an extension, give me Mayo.
I thought you were going to say Basallo. I agree. I like the Basallo answer. Give me the Basallo. I hate to say it because it sounds kind of screwed up, but this is the business part of it. Like, Basallo isn't going to take an enormous type contract. You can lock down what is potentially a generational type player for much less than probably what he deserves. But he's in a state where he's still going to make life-changing money, and you show the rest of the international market. You show all those kids back in his home country, all those kids want to be the next Samuel Basallo. They want to become Baltimore Orioles. That's going to go a huge way. He has to hit. He's got to prove he can be a major leaguer first. But I just think the impact that Basallo is going to have on this organization could extend for years and years and years, even when he's not playing. I love it. My other answer is going to be Santander. I want to see Santander in an Orioles uniform for a few more years, to be honest. But long term, yeah, give me that Basallo contract. If you firmly believe that he's going to be a stud for you, which I feel like the Orioles do, let's go. Let's lock him down.
Yeah, I was very, very torn between the two of those. So yeah, great choice.
Go to this question now. This is a fun one here from Garrett. Build a Mount Rushmore of Orioles for the last 10 years. I'll start with Nick on this.
I feel like this is like the trade proposal ideas. People are going to come attacking you for whatever you say. Last 10 years, I'm going to go 3 pitchers and a hitter. Chris Davis, Manny Machado, Adam Jones. The pitcher was tough. I'm going to say Chris Tillman. Roast me.
I'm going to say I'm going all hitters. Adam Jones, Manny Machado, Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman.
Bob and I have the exact same Mount Rushmore. I won't even try to swap it out just to be different. Those are the exact 4 guys that I had, and I think that their production speaks for itself. And maybe you look at Adley and Gunnar and think, well, Adley's only in year 3, Gunnar's only in year 2. Why do they get to be up there? They're just that good.
And they've
Fair.
already had a huge impact in those couple years. So, yeah.
If you had to put a pitcher up there, though, who would you guys put up there?
Corbin Burns.
Felix Bautista. I mean, do you know how cool
Yeah, that's true.
that would
That's
look on
fair.
Mount Rushmore? Just that stare down.
The mountain on the mountain.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Fair.
So
I
what
like
about all right, I got one. Ryan Flaherty, Adam Frazier, Rougned Odor, and just for our fourth, let's throw in Caleb Joseph. How's that sound?
Pat Valleca got screwed.
Oh, the first favorite player in Orioles on the Verge history. I forgot about him.
That's what we
my
need.
goodness.
Who is the anti Mount Rushmore of On the Verge? That would be a more fun conversation, I feel like. We'll go to the next one, though. I believe this is the last one, unless. Sorry, reading the comment there. No, thanks. Ben H says, if you can only keep two, who are you keeping? Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basayo, Jackson Holiday, Heston Kjerstad. You only get to pick two. Which two?
Just rip my heart out, why don't you? I mean, sorry, Heston Kjerstad, but you're the easy choice to leave off, even though you are a top 50 prospect and an outstanding hitter. My heart says Mayo and Basayo is who I would keep. My head says Basayo and Holiday. Super hard choice. So I go with my heart, Mayo and Basayo.
This is really, really hard. And this is one instance where I'll just pick a different answer just to be different. Jackson Holiday, and I'll go with Kobe Mayo because Mayo's skill set is something the Orioles absolutely need. And I'm just waiting for the time for him to come along and get entrenched in the majors because then I'll feel like this lineup's already great, but the lineup will feel complete when you add that right-handed power to it.
I like that point, and I love Kobe Mayo a lot. But my answer is Samuel Basayo. I just gave him the big extension. I'm going with Samuel Basayo. I don't care if he ever catches either. That bat has the potential to be very, very special, even if he never catches a day in his life at the major league level. And I'm going Jackson Holiday. I don't want to say it's Colton Cowser 2.0 again, but I feel like Holiday's stint in the major leagues left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And fair, he wasn't that good when he was up in the major leagues. But I do think he has improved since going down to AAA. The injury is unfortunate. All injuries are, but that sucks for him. He's still the top prospect in baseball. If you want to say it's Paul Skeens, fair, but he's still one of the top prospects in baseball. Orioles still made the right choice. This he's still a teenager. He's going to be up the middle at second base for this organization for a long time to come. And maybe it'll be him next to Basayo over at first base for many years to come. That'll be fun. But there's definitely a top three that's hard to choose from. Kjerstad is the odd man out there. Kjerstad, I'm trading tomorrow for starting pitcher, honestly, if you tell me to. So it is tough. Love you, Kobe, but I'm going Basayo and Holiday.
See if I can get deep in the weeds of my thought process. If we can only keep two of them, that means we're trading the other. So, if I'm this torn, then Holiday probably has the most value. He's the least likely to sign long term to keep longer than his initial service time. So that was what pushed it over the edge for me.
Completely fair. And with that does it for this mailbag. Thank you as always for your excellent questions. Most of our questions come from Discord, but you're welcome to chime in on social media or during our live show. And if you're going to do it on social media, you've got a lot of outlets to do it because we're over at Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, head over to Patreon and become a member of our community. You can sign up for as little as $3 a month, and at the $5 and $10 levels, have exclusive bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. We're also only a couple weeks away from dropping our top 50 update for the month of July. You're not going to want to miss that. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.